do not believe that that is the current state of anybody in the Kamala Harris camp, including Kamala Harris herself. I do not believe that for 1 second, but I do believe that we can gracefully but urgently pressure her and Democrats in power who have been so reluctant to have this conversation to have it now, and let them know what a betrayal, frankly, it was and is if they will not have this conversation, and that they are essentially preventing us from ever being able to have a free and fair election again if they will not take the leadership position on this. Because God knows Donald Trump and his allies who will do anything to stay in power. They launched a deadly insurrection last time, will do anything to stay in power. We know for sure that they will not be having it. So this is on you. It's on you, Democrats. It's on you, Kamala Harris. Have this conversation on your book tour. Come on Lights On and talk to me. I will have a loving and graceful but direct and needed conversation with you about what happened in the 2024 election. You were not wrong when you felt that joy and that love and that incredible power in those stadiums that you filled. You were not wrong. She talked about January 6th. And if you're not a stranger to Lights On, you know that we started the protest movement of this illegal administration back on January 3rd with 14th Now by demanding that lawmakers invoke Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to reject Trump's presidency as illegal as it is. It is unconstitutional to this day. And she talked about certifying the election of the so-called election of Trump, even if we take it at face value, this certifying that election, and how it was somehow an exercise in the peaceful transfer of power. And the audience clapped for her, and Stephen Colbert congratulated her and commended her, I should say. And I, of course, brought myself back to that day and knowing what a straw man distraction it was to think for 1 second that certifying the election of a man who violated the peaceful transfer of power was engaging in the peaceful transfer of power. That was not an honorable thing to do. That was not a dignified thing to do. That was not something that restored any kind of sanity or law or order to our country. You only have to look at the unbelievable damage and cruelty and sabotage of our Constitution and law that this man and his illegal presidency have done since they took power to know there was nothing peaceful about letting him in violation of our Constitution. She said later in the interview, she said, Stephen Colbert asked her, is there anything that surprises you about how bad this administration is, more or less? And she said to him, she wasn't surprised by how bad Trump in 2025 and all the things they were trying to do was or is. She, of course, warned us all about it many times, as did I and so many people. But she said she was surprised about the people who considered themselves guardians just capitulating. And I thought, Madam Vice President, you may not understand this or see it, but you capitulated too. You capitulated by not calling for recounts. And who knows? I believe this woman to be genuine. I don't know. Maybe she was so crowded out by other advisors, other influences, that who knows? Maybe those letters didn't get to her. That's why I thought it was such a gross negligence that networks like Midas Touch, with the platform that they had, would not amplify that conversation. And I did everything in my power to do so. Imagine if everybody was like me, and was the networks and the independent so-called media organizations and everybody was amplifying the calls for this, for Kamala Harris and her campaign to have recounts. Imagine, then it would have certainly reached her, but I'm not entirely sure it did reach her. So, and I'm not even entirely sure that Miss Kamala Harris or any number of the Democrats who voted to certify this election were aware of their legal authority to reject Trump's electors on January 6th. Once again, I used my entire platform for a month to do my best as one woman to educate the public about why, in spite of the ruling in Trump v. Anderson, Donald Trump was still disqualified and still needed to be banned from office. And nothing in that ruling prevented Congress from rejecting his electors on January 6th. In fact, it was their constitutional duty to do so, and every one of them abandoned it. But I'm not even sure that most of those lawmakers understood that. I'm not sure. We have to have these conversations now. We cannot continue to pretend on a daily basis like Donald Trump is running a legitimate administration. Every time I hear somebody say, after he does some insane, cruel thing, some illegal, brazen, egregious act, well, this is what the people voted for. No, this is not what the people voted for. An ex-CIA whistleblower, an investigative journalist, multiple cybersecurity and election security experts, data analysts. I could go on and on, not to mention the average clear-thinking American who saw the state of our country before this election, the threat that we knew Donald Trump to pose, his mental decline, his criminality, all that we had collectively suffered from this man and his assaults, his predatory nature, that we didn't have the common sense to make sure he was never elected again. I don't think so. We did have it. Yes, there are people in this country that are brainwashed. There are millions of them. Far, far too many. But we are many, many more than that. So, this is my call to anybody in power right now to have bold strokes of moral courage, as Mary Baker Eddy says, to let love, true love, both self-respect, respect for yourself that results in respect for your constituents and for the people and for the Constitution. Let that be the liberator that sets us free from this egregious, vile nightmare that we seem to be all living. And for each one of us to have gratitude for what we have done individually, what our country has done, and to let that gratitude be a prayer that brings these things into our experience. I know this sounds metaphysical. I'm trying to share it in the most simple way I can with you, but this is my life. I'm telling you, this is the reason I have anything at all, that I have anything to share with you, is because I turn to a higher power for answers. So I'm going to share with you one other thing that I love so much. This is from an article from the early 1900s called The New Woman. And since we talked so much about Kamala Harris today and what she could do and what, frankly, she already did, I'm going to read this to you. This is from over 100 years ago, but as relevant right this moment as ever before. It says, in olden times, it was the Amazons who conquered the Invincibles, and we must now look to their daughters to overcome our own allied armies of evil and to save us from ourselves. She must and will succeed, for as David sang, God shall help her, and that right early. Woman must not and will not be disheartened by 1,000 denials or 1,000,000 of broken pledges. With the assurance of faith she prays, with the certainty of inspiration she works, and with the patience of genius she waits.